The long-awaited debt ceiling deal passed the Senate Thursday night after getting through the House Wednesday, averting a default. It will now head to President Biden's desk.
Though both sides had to agree, and this was a compromise deal, an overwhelming majority, so 63 to 36, voted in favor of the bill. Here to dive into the nitty-gritty of this is Seth Higgins, a Krauthammer fellow. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you make of this compromise in the Senate and just the package that they've come together with, adjusting the budget, making some cuts to public programs to avoid a default, and the conversation around raising the debt ceiling?
I mean, the way I interpret it is exactly that. This is a compromise. This is a messy bill, but it is a good bill for the country. It's a good bill for both President Biden and the GOP, and it should be viewed that way. Neither side got exactly what they wanted, but given the very slim majority Republicans have in the House of Representatives, they got a pretty good deal. Now, it's a little bit frustrating to someone who kind of comes from a more conservative leaning that more of the GOP conference behind this bill. A lot of people, about 1/3 of their conference voted no in the House, and a majority voted no in the Senate from the GOP side. I think that a lot of that's messaging. They got a pretty good bill. They should take the W and go home.
Absolutely. I mean, do you think President Biden is smarting a little bit? Because he started these negotiations by saying that he didn't want to do anything besides a clean raising of the debt ceiling. And now he has agreed to include some level of caps on spending.
You're exactly right. President Biden absolutely stepped on a rake on this one. He had an opportunity back in December when he had full control of all the political branches of government to have a clean increase on the debt ceiling. He sat on it for too long. He didn't expect Kevin McCarthy to get his act together. Kevin got his act together. He passed a bill. Then he kind of said he wouldn't negotiate. Then he was finally forced into the negotiating table, and now he's eating crow.
So you said, there's a slim majority in the House, and you were surprised that you saw Democrats actually working with McCarthy on this. Would you have liked to see McCarthy use a little bit more of his power to get more cuts? Is that what you're saying you're hoping for here?
Not exactly, and I'm very glad that there are some reasonable people on the D side of the aisle who came across to help out. What I'm frustrated is there are a lot of people on the GOP side who are kind of using this as a messaging opportunity to claim that they aren't part of the Washington establishment. They're fighting against this bill, when in reality, they knew this was a must-pass bill, when in reality, given their slim majority, they understood this is as good as they're going to get. But they're still voting no. They're still going back to their districts, claiming they're fighters, claiming they're taking it to the Washington establishment, when they really needed the Washington establishment to get this one across the finish line.
Even though the deal took months of back and forth, we still heard former President Donald Trump saying that the negotiations actually weren't long enough. Let's watch this clip of him taking a dig at the deal at his recent rally in Iowa.
Said, look, this is going to be painful because China doesn't want to make this deal, and you're going to have to, live with it. And I would watch people being interviewed in Iowa, Nebraska, different places, and they'd say, it's painful right now. I said, you're going to go through a little pain before I get this deal done, because you have to. That's the way it works. And we should have gone through a little more pain, perhaps, over the last few days to get maybe a deal done. But if you understand what I mean. But that's okay. It's okay.
Of course, Trump also admitted recently in a CNN town hall that his approach on this changes based on whether or not he's president. So were you surprised, Seth, to see this criticism from him?
No, I mean, that is what Donald Trump is. He's a criticism-generating machine that is all heat and no light. Of course, he's going to say, yeah, we should have went through a little bit more pain, but he doesn't exactly define what that pain is. Is that pain default? Because I don't think that's exactly a responsible pain threshold to put upon the American people. Listen, this was a good deal. Kevin McCarthy did his job. Kevin McCarthy led his conference. Kevin McCarthy got, half of a loaf of bread. So I don't exactly see how Donald Trump thinks he could have done something more miraculous than this. So no, I'm not really buying Trump's narrative.
So, Seth, I know you're someone who's put some thought into fiscal and monetary policy in the United States. A lot of folks are saying now we could do away with the debt ceiling entirely. Many other countries, I think there's only one other country that has a debt limit at all. When it comes to public spending, typically governments will issue bonds as necessary and manage the dollars or whatever currency they're using to manage public spending and fund the spending as needed without having this number, which I would say is arbitrary, limiting what budgets we can pass, and also kind of using it like instead of coming up with a budget with the Congress existing, a new Congress can come in and say, actually, we're going to use this as an excuse to relitigate everything that the prior Congress budgeted for. What do you make of just the conversation around getting rid of the debt limit entirely?
I'm surprisingly comfortable with the debt limit. I don't exactly know what the alternative is. I mean, of course, we can go back to the 1800s and have Congress approve every single issuance of debt. But that's what the debt ceiling replaced, is that Congress doesn't have to act on every single bond issue that the federal government comes up with. So I actually think it's an okay tool. A lot of people are frustrated with the fact that people use it to kind of force these arbitrary crises. I get that. But this does also force compromise. So yes, it is kind of a strange creation, but it's a creation that can work within our system, and Kevin McCarthy has just demonstrated that.
Seth, from the perspective of the Republican Party, do you think the people who were perhaps skeptical or suspicious of McCarthy's rise to power and perhaps were reluctant to say that he could lead this slim majority in the House, do you think they're looking at this now and saying, Kevin McCarthy is actually exceeding our expectations?
100%. And I'm one of those people. I've long been skeptical of Kevin McCarthy. I wasn't exactly sure why he even wanted this job. And it's clear he wanted this job because he actually enjoys being in the GOP conference in the House of Representatives. Past GOP speakers, such as Paul Ryan and Boehner, didn't like their conference. They didn't like dealing with the kooks and the wingnuts inside their conference. Kevin McCarthy is very adept at negotiating with them. He's really proven that point. So yeah, I was a early McCarthy naysayer, and he's gotten the job done.
So Kevin McCarthy is also now saying he's turning his attention towards potentially cutting Social Security and Medicare, which are really popular and I would say necessary public programs. What do you make of these politics of we're going to cut a lot of social safety net programs, but we're not going to touch some other areas of extreme spending where we see $858 billion being given to the Defense Department?
I mean, $858 billion is a big top line number, don't get me wrong, but the majority of federal outlays, at least 60%, are transfer payments. And most of those transfer payments come from Social Security and Medicare. So if you want to get serious about reforming the federal government, if you want to get serious about our debt, if you want to get serious about our deficits, you have to dive into those programs and make substantial reforms. And whether we like it or not, in the early 2030s, Social Security is going to run into insolvency. This is just a straight line actuarial projection. So yes, those programs are popular. Yes, those programs are going to be around. Yes, those programs should be around. But that doesn't negate the financial reality that we're about to face.
And how do you think Republicans can appropriately message that to the American populace so that it's clear that they're trying to reform the programs to make sure they're solvent as opposed to just getting rid of people's checks?
Yeah, Amber, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be a far wealthier man. I don't know. Because if you go to any GOP town hall and you do anything to suggest that you're going to touch Social Security, you will be taken out of there in pieces by those folks. GOP primary voters are very, very protective of Social Security and Medicaid because they tend to be older. So any hint that you're going to touch those causes immediate panic. I think the thing that you have to really impress upon the American people is that if we don't reform these programs, there will be automatic cuts. And those automatic cuts will be far deeper and far more severe than any reform we can come up with now.
Yeah, I mean, that exact issue basically ruined Rick Scott's chances of elevating himself within the Republican Senate. We're going to have to leave it there, Seth. We're all out of time, but thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back with more Rising.